I wouldn't show my face at the county fair if I were you." My brother's voice was sharp with contempt, his boots crunching over the gravel between us, like they owned the land beneath them. He didn't even look me in the eye, just tossed the words over his shoulder, as he walked toward the barn that used to be ours. Now the locks were changed. The gate had a sign reading, "Private Property," and my name had been scrubbed from the mailbox like I'd never existed. I stood there anyway, hands in my coat pockets, staring at the weathered siding and the familiar weather vane still spinning from the wind. The same wind that used to wake me up at 4 a.m. for milking. The same barn where I'd nursed calves through the night, stitched wounds no one else noticed, and planned a life my family never believed I had the right to. They thought they'd buried me under years of condescension and silence. They thought calling me just a vet would shame me into disappearing. They forgot one thing: I never stopped building. And the cattle grazing in their pasture, they don't belong to them. They answer to me. When our father died, his will was simple: the farm goes to my children. Share it. Make it work. No fine print. No division. Just a legacy entrusted to blood. I was the one who stayed behind during his final months, giving up my clinic hours to drive him to chemo, cleaning his boots when he was too weak to do it himself, and helping him keep the herd calm when his hands trembled. But when the funeral ended and the lawyers left, reality set in fast. Luke appointed himself acting head of operations, and Mandy backed him without blinking. "You're not cut out for this, Sarah," he said, arms folded like a foreman, not a brother. "You've got your little clinic in town. You've already moved on," Mandy added. "We're keeping things here tight, family only." That's when I knew. In their eyes, I wasn't family anymore. Not the daughter who skipped prom to pull a calf in the freezing barn. Not the sister who ran field checks when Luke was nursing hangovers and Mandy was off at beauty school. To them, I was just the woman who fixed pets in a small-town strip mall, an outsider in coveralls. They changed the locks 2 days later. I drove up that weekend to check on Dad's old mare, but the barn door was bolted. My nameplate on the stall office. Gone. A neighbor gently told me, "They said you're not on the team anymore." And just like that, I was erased. What they didn't know, every time they ignored me, underestimated me, or crossed me off a list, they were helping me build a fire I wouldn't put out until I stood alone at the top. They saw a vet who trimmed dog nails and vaccinated barn cats. What they never saw, what they never bothered to ask, was what I'd been doing all those years. They rolled their eyes at my little practice in town, while they doubled down on outdated methods and squeezed every last drop out of the farm's dwindling yields. I was out on the road. I wasn't just tending to pets, I was networking, studying, learning the science of sustainable breeding, and quietly becoming the name people called when their livestock were too valuable to risk on amateurs. It started with a favor. A high-strung rancher named Edna called me in a panic. Her prize heifer was in breech labor, and the county vet was an hour away. I dropped everything, drove through a snowstorm, and delivered a healthy calf under a flickering barn light. That calf, Sierra's pride, would go on to sweep the regional show circuit. Edna never forgot. And when her health declined a year later, she pulled me aside and said, "You've got more sense in your silence than all the loudmouths I've ever done business with. I want you to take over the line." She offered me a half stake in her prize-winning bloodline on one condition: keep them off the radar until they matured. No county fair flash. No showboating. Just build. Quietly. And so I did. Over 5 years, I poured every spare dollar into boarding fees, training handlers, tracking genetics, and microchipping each calf. I knew their muscle definition like the back of my hand. I watched them grow from skittish calves to majestic, muscular champions. While my siblings thought I was buried in pet dander, I was managing the birthlings of tomorrow's show champions, under a different ranch name, with clean, quiet records, and zero publicity. And now, those same cattle grazed the back pastures of the family farm. Because 6 months before Dad passed, when Luke needed emergency funds to repair the West Barn, I loaned him the money, with a handshake agreement to board a few head of cattle, rent-free for a year. He never asked whose they were. He assumed they were his. He assumed wrong. The first sign of trouble came in a text from a fellow vet, at the fairgrounds. "Hey, saw the Whitmore farm is entering a full herd this year. Didn't know you patched things up with your siblings?" I didn't reply. Because I hadn't. I drove to the fair's online registry, and my breath caught. All 5 of my prize cattle, including Blue Ridge Majesty, the undefeated bull, had been entered under Luke's name. Breed, correct. Lineage, copied from my original filings. Owner, Whitmore Family Farms. They'd submitted forged documentation. They were claiming my life's work as theirs. At first, I thought it was ego. But then I found out what was really going on. Luke was applying for a $250,000 development grant through the state's Agricultural Innovation Program. The grant committee prioritized applicants with livestock performance records and breeding potential. That's why the county fair mattered so much this year. Winning Best in Show wouldn't just earn them applause, it would secure the future of the family farm, and with it, the prestige, subsidies, and partnerships that came with the title. But here's the twist: the farm was broke. Bad harvests, overdue loans, unrenewed contracts, they were barely keeping the lights on. If the grant didn't come through, they'd lose everything. So my siblings did what they'd always done, took credit for someone else's labor, and hoped no one looked too closely. They counted on the community remembering their last name, not mine. They bet the bank on cattle they didn't own. And they never expected I'd show up. With papers. With evidence. With the truth. They thought this was a family spat. They had no idea they'd just turned it into a war. I didn't storm the farm. I didn't make a scene. That's what they would have done. That's what they expected me to do. Instead, I did what I'd always done. I played the long game, quiet, clean, and thorough. I started by pulling out every contract, vet record, and ownership certificate I'd been filing away for 5 years. Each of my cattle had a microchip registered in my name, along with their DNA profiles, breeder contracts, and vaccination logs, all timestamped and notarized. You'd have thought I was preparing for a lawsuit the day they were born. Then I called Edna's nephew, now managing her estate, and asked for a favor, a sworn letter confirming the full transfer of ownership from the Champion bloodline to me. He overnighted it, along with copies of Edna's original breeding agreements. Next, I filed a formal dispute with the County Fair's Livestock Committee, submitting all documents under Rule 14B. Improper ownership or misrepresentation results in immediate disqualification and committee review. I didn't stop there. I reached out to the State Ag Board's Ethics Division, attaching every relevant document along with a quiet tip that someone might be attempting to fraudulently apply for public funds using falsified animal ownership records. A formal inquiry was opened within 48 hours. Then, I made a few polite calls to contacts I'd met over the years, livestock handlers, ranch bloggers, a local journalist who once wrote a feature on women in agriculture. I didn't ask for favors. I just let them know, if you're going to the fair, there might be a story you'll want to keep your eyes on. By the time the first trailers pulled into the fairgrounds, my name was already murmured between pens. But I stayed silent. I let Luke submit his forged entry cards. Let Mandy pose for pictures. Let them post about our legacy stock. I even smiled when they walked right past me in the livestock tent, not realizing the quiet woman behind the clipboard was the storm they never saw coming. Because when the announcer asked all owners to report to the ring for random chip verification, and the scanner beeped and blinked Sarah Whitmore, owner, that was checkmate. It happened under the white canopy of the Grand Champion Ring, right as the sun dipped behind the fairgrounds, and the bleachers filled with neighbors, judges, sponsors, and old friends. The committee official held the microchip scanner in his gloved hand, still reading the data on the screen. One by one, the names appeared, clear and indisputable: owner, Sarah Whitmore. Owner, Sarah Whitmore. Owner, Sarah Whitmore. Luke stood beside Blue Ridge Majesty, grinning and waving to the audience, still clueless. Until the judge leaned over the mic and calmly said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a correction to make." Mandy blinked, her fake smile freezing mid-photo. Luke squinted toward the judge's table, confused. Due to a confirmed ownership discrepancy, the entry known as Whitmore Family Farms will be disqualified. The livestock in question are under verified ownership of Ms. Sarah Whitmore. The crowd fell into murmurs. Then silence. Luke stormed across the arena, red in the face, grabbing at the clipboard in the judge's hand. "What the hell is this? That's our stock." The judge didn't flinch. "The microchip data and certified documents say otherwise." He turned toward me then. "For the first time in months. You set this up." "I protected what's mine," I replied calmly. "You tried to steal it. There's a difference." Mandy hissed, "This is family. You're really doing this in front of everyone." I stepped forward, voice steady. "You kicked me off the land my father raised me on. You erased my name from his memory. You paraded my work as your own. You made it public. I'm just giving the truth a mic." The announcer continued. "And this year's grand champion, Blue Ridge Majesty, bred and owned by Sarah Whitmore, earns the top award for excellence in genetic lineage, care, and conditioning." The applause started slow, then rolled like thunder. Luke turned and walked off without another word. Mandy followed, covering her face as cameras flashed. The photographer asked me to step forward. I took the lead rope in hand and stood beside my bull, my legacy, while they snapped the photo that would run on the front page of the Agricultural Journal. The following morning, vet-turned-champion breeder shocks county fair, a legacy reclaimed. Later that evening, I stood alone beneath the banner that read, "Champions Circle." The crowd had thinned, but people still drifted by, farmers I hadn't seen in years, young girls in 4-H jackets, even the county supervisor, who asked if I'd consider mentoring students in sustainable breeding. It hit me then, this wasn't just a win. It was a reckoning. Not just for me, but for every quiet person ever told they didn't belong on land they helped build. And I wasn't done. The next morning, I made it official. I finalized the purchase of 150 acres just south of the original Whitmore farm, land Dad once said he'd dreamed of buying, if we ever made it big. I named it Stillwater Ridge, in honor of the quiet persistence that built everything. I hired 3 of the farm hands my siblings had laid off last year to cut costs. They'd called me that same day, hoping for work. I told them they'd be treated with respect, paid fairly, and given credit where it was due. A month later, the state grant committee published their investigation results. Whitmore Family Farms was banned from applying for future funding for 10 years. The forged documents had violated multiple ethics guidelines. All applications were voided. Luke showed up at Stillwater Ridge 2 weeks later, no swagger this time. Just dust on his boots and desperation in his eyes. "Can we talk?" he asked, hat in hand. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just listened. He stammered through an apology, half sincere, half sad. Said he didn't realize how far gone things were. Said he might lose the home place. Said he'd be willing to work under me if I'd take him on. I looked him in the eye and said, "I don't run a charity. I run a ranch. You taught me that when you kicked me off my own land." And then I added, calmly but firmly, "But I also learned from Dad. He believed in second chances. So you can start Monday. With the night shift. Cleaning stalls." He blinked. "You serious?" I nodded. We all start somewhere. Some of us just have to start over. And with that, I walked away, leaving him standing in the same dust he once thought I'd never rise from.